Tacitus Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the reaction and perception of the globalist leftist to the interview Kamala Harris had on Fox News, and being interviewed by quite a moderate interviewer, I thought, Brett Baier. Now, just looking at that interview, Kamala looked irritated and annoyed pretty much throughout the whole thing, and even looked like a deer in the headlights half the time. She just didn't know what to do with the questions. She just had her canned, rehearsed responses that her handlers had written up for her, but I don't think she even comprehended or understood. She tried to fall back and look, I was brought up in a middle-class household. These are all prepared lines prepared by her goons and stooges and handlers. But outside of that, she didn't seem to know what to do. She reflexively just said that every problem that existed in all time was because of Donald Trump. And this came across as so absurd and ridiculous that she kept on falling back on that or trying to. And I thought Brett Baier was very, very soft. He could have said, look, Madam Vice President, that is ridiculous. You've been in, which he did to some extent. You've been in office 3.5 years. These problems are your problems. You own them. You explain to the American people what, he could have gone down that path, but he didn't. I thought his questions were fairly soft and gentle. He didn't really have to go in hard. He just had to ask real questions. That was all that it would take. Now, at first I thought there's no way the Kamala team would have agreed to that interview unless the questions were pre-arranged, pre-agreed, and she pre-rehearsed them and that sort of thing. Because really, as soon as you get outside of the pre-rehearsed lines and the teleprompter, Kamala's hopeless. She's screwed. She can't handle anything. So as with any affirmative action hire, she's simply not up to it. But it seems not either. Brett Baier changed the emphasis of the question or added a question or something. But it seemed that once Kamala was off balance, that she never was able to regain her balance. And you can see her when she's getting soft interviews, she's got that smile, that little girly sort of giggle smile thing happening, because she knows what the questions are going to be. And again, all the answers are rehearsed. And she knows that no matter how much she slips up or screws up, that there won't be a follow-up question that might hold her to account. This interview was different, so it was interesting to watch. I think it's the first real interview I think she's ever had, and again it was a soft one. They didn't go in on Brett Baier didn't go after Kamala in the way that they go after Trump and JD Vance, where there's this aggressive interrogation type tactic that they use against Trump and Vance, where they keep on going after them and try and embarrass them, and there's gotcha questions, and they'll use outrageous lies and misinformation to say, well, you're wrong about this, and because this is and so on. So fact checkers have said, and and so they're constantly trying to put Trump and Vance on the back foot, and also they approach Trump and Vance with this moral indignation of, you are evil, Nazi, hateful people, and we're going to expose you now so say to the American people now that you're not Hitler thrice. Go and say, and this type of thing. And it's not an interview. I recently saw one with Vance and this one got quite a bit of coverage where the interviewer who was doing this moral indignation thing, you've done something evil and hateful, I'm going to hold you to account, as if the interviewer was some sort of paragon of moral virtue. And it was about whether the Venezuelan gangs had taken over, I don't know what the numbers were, had taken over 20 or 10 apartment buildings in an American city. And the interviewer was she wasn't an interviewer, she's an attack dog, but the interviewer was had this thing, this straining. Will you admit now that you're a fucking Nazi? That type of approach, saying that and we've contacted the mayor or the city manager or something of that place, and they say that that it's not 20 apartment buildings being taken, there's only 10. So will you now say that Donald Trump and JD Vance are very cool and very calm? Back. Yeah, you ought to hear yourself. What are you saying? It's okay that any apartment buildings can be taken over in the US? What, Trump says there's 20, but there was really only 10 or 12 or 15. I mean, you're kidding me, right? I mean, is this your question? Do you accept that Venezuelan goons and gangs can take over apartment buildings, and you're saying that's acceptable? And I mean, I'm paraphrasing. That wasn't his exact response, but he came back quite good. You ought to hear yourself. And that type of shut the interviewer up. That was, she thought it was the big zinger, the kill shot gotcha question. And that's how they approach every interview with Trump and Vance. As far as I can see, they're just looking for the kill shot, but they don't treat Kamala in the same way. But how are people responding to this? Online, the pro-globalist leftists, they think it's an outrage that Kamala should be held to the same standard as Trump and Vance. But why is that? I mean, let's just have a little look at that. They come from the approach that, Trump and Vance are literally Hitler, if not Hitler thrice or a million times over. So we're allowed to go after them to expose their Hitlerness. So that's okay. We're allowed to do that. And any lie we tell, any deceit we use, any ambush we use to nail them and kill shot them, quite acceptable, absolutely necessary. In fact, we are morally good by doing this sort of thing. But how if you invite them to an interview that's supposed to be about such and such and so and so, then you go after them with lies and deceit and pretend statistics that you've just pulled out of your ass. You mean that's okay? Well, yes, that's okay. We're allowed to do that, just like we're allowed to rig elections, rig court cases, stack juries. We're allowed to, because we're fighting Hitler. We're literally fighting Hitler, so we're allowed to do anything we want. But Kamala is a good person. Well, hold on. I mean, how's she a good person? I mean, are we talking about, she's good at oral sex or something? No, she's a good person. Because she's black and she's a woman, or she's dark skinned and she's a woman, so she must therefore be good. Therefore, we don't have to, and we shouldn't. It's morally bad if we question her and hold her to the same standard and hold her to account. So they view, certainly plenty of places that online comments I've looked at, they view that anything other than the softest of softball interviews is an outrage against Kamala, because she's dark-skinned and a woman. I mean, so you shouldn't be allowed to ask difficult questions or hold such people to account because they've got some sort of miasma of moral good that surrounds them, and then that's therefore means that they're excused from all scrutiny and all accountability. And this, of course, should be so in interviews. But remember, we're looking for someone who's going to be president of the United States. It doesn't matter. She's brown and female. I mean, that's it. You're not allowed to question such people or hold them to account. Well, why shouldn't they be held to the same standard as any other political candidate? In this case, say Trump and Vance or something. No. They're bad and she's good. So she should not. And it's really that, and it's that infantile and that absurdly childish and ridiculous and also ideological, of course, where they see that. So they see the Brett Baier interview on Fox News, which again I thought was pretty tame. The fact that Kamala couldn't handle simple, basic questions doesn't mean it was an ambush by Brett Baier. I love the part where Kamala tried the one that gets her out of problems in other interviews with, come on, you know what we're talking about. Come on, you know what I mean. And he just quite calmly goes, no, I don't know what you mean. What do you mean? And you see the look on Kamala's face is priceless there when she realised the gambit hadn't worked. But again, his questions weren't tough. You've been in the administration for the last, nearly 4 years now, and these are the failures. Between 6 and 8 million, some say even higher, illegals have just walked into the country. You don't know where they are, don't know who they are. Tell us about this. Is that not a failure of your administration? Well, the system's broken. It's Donald Trump's fault. Now, Baier wasn't having that. Hey, hold on a minute. You're the vice president. Trump's fault. mean, seriously, anyone who was watching that interview who thought about voting for Kamala would have to change their mind after that. And again, they weren't difficult questions, and how her team, her whole repertoire and interview sort of persona is built around some basic, cackling and the giggling and just not getting difficult questions, and there's no follow-up. So if someone says, well, what about all the illegals? Well, the system's broken. It's all Donald Trump's fault. Right, next question. And that's what she's used to. The idea that Brett Baier, well, no, you've been the vice president. You've got to own some of this, haven't you? And that screwed her. She just didn't know what to do. And it surprised me her team hadn't prepared her for that. Okay, this is what you do or say if you get a follow-up question. And her constantly blurting out, Donald Trump, yeah. That just didn't fly. Now, it may fly when she's doing, some soft interview on The View or Whoopi Goldberg's talking to her or something. That may work, but it doesn't work outside of that. Anything outside of the bubble means that she's going to get at some point a question that she has to answer, and answer credibly and accurately. And she couldn't even do that. So it was a high risk strategy, I think, going outside of the bubble. Brett Baier was probably a good choice, in as much as he's not brutal or aggressive, far from it. His questions were measured and sensible and reasonable, and he was asking questions a lot of people in the public would ask. Those softball bullshit questions she gets on The View and those sort of things, they're not fucking questions. So anyway, but this is the difference. The commentary around, certainly that I've seen on social media, is Kamala should not be held to the same standards, and it's because she's a dark-skinned woman. It should be assumed that whatever she wants to do, has done, and will do is good, and therefore it should not be questioned or follow-up questioned or anything like that. There should be no question that exposes her inadequacy, because that's like racist, misogynist, patriarchy, So it's all bound up in ideology rather than any form of known reality. And it's the reverse, though. The ideology still works, or still applies, rather, when you talk about Trump and Vance. Hitler thrice, literally Hitler, Therefore, any lies we tell, any untruth we use, any deceit we use, any kill shot questions and so on we use is acceptable because literally Hitler, that type of thing. So, but it indicates the absurdity and the bifurcation of the American and Western, by the way, I would argue, because it's globalist inspired, this of the Western political system. Anyone who opposes the globalist project is literally Hitler, and that's how they've cast it, and that's how the media are running it. And if you want a masterclass on how to handle these cheap 2-bit hustler stooge activists masquerading as journalists, you watching Vance going around and his very measured, unflappable type responses. It's a masterclass on how to handle these people. Quite impressive, actually, I think. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.